Hello and welcome to another episode of the Uncommon Energy Podcast. On this week's episode, we'll be talking about the Liverpool Regionals upcoming this weekend. We'll give our thoughts on the current meta, the state of the game, and also some of our predictions for the tournament this weekend. We'll, of course, have Guess That Flavor Text, and then we'll wrap up this episode by talking about the new era of the Pokemon TCG, the Scarlet and Violet base set cards that were all just recently revealed over in Japan will likely be all included in our Scarlet and Violet base set, which is set to come out at the end of March. So it seems really far away. Hopefully, it goes by quicker than it feels like it will, but it probably will drag on, and we will be living in this Silver Tempest meta for a long time. My name is Chip Ritchie, and I'm joined here as always by my co-host and friend Azul GG. What's up, Azul? How we doing, man?
Doing all right this week. I'm a little bit sick, or quite a bit sick. Getting better, starting to feel a little bit better. Well enough to record the cast. So I apologize if I mute randomly throughout the cast. A couple times, I'm coughing, sneezing, stuff like that. But besides that, doing pretty well. And looking forward towards Crown Zenith coming up. This was it released Thursday on PTCGO. Pokemon actually sent me some Crown Zenith as well. So shout out to them for sending me some Crown Zenith. Mine's not here quite yet, but I did want to give them a shout out. My stuff's arriving tomorrow, and yeah, you got some there as well. It looks like Chip.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine hasn't quite arrived yet. It's supposed to come tomorrow. So, yeah, shout out to Pokemon for that, and excited for some new cards to mess around with. But I don't think it is going to change too much of the format. So we're going to be stuck in the Silver Tempest meta until Scarlet and Violet comes out. It feels like.
Yeah, Pokemon hooked me up with some Crown Zenith stuff as well. Those two boxes I just showed, plus an Elite Trainer box. So big thanks to Pokemon for supporting both me and Azul, supporting the podcast, supporting Azul's content, all of that stuff. We really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm excited regardless of. I don't know that how much this set's going to change competitively, but I'm excited to open up the set. There's a lot of really cool cards in it, and there's definitely going to be a lot of those trainer gallery cards to go after. I know Azul doesn't really care too much about the collecting, but I like getting some nice shiny cards every now and then myself. Looking forward to it. So yeah, and this past weekend I also won a tournament. Let's go. I won a GLC local event, which I haven't played at this store that this tournament was at in a long time. Like in over a year for sure, I feel like. And there was 23 people there, so it was like a pretty sizable showing, I feel like, for just a locals. But yeah, it was a GLC tournament. I won with a dark deck, very similar to our buddy JW's Dark List from a few months ago that he won one of the full grip tournaments with. I think it's probably like 5-ish cards different if I had to guess. I don't remember exactly, but added some different supporters, I think, is the main thing. I think the Pokemon lineup and energy count is pretty much the same. But yeah, very fun, and GLC is a lot of fun. I hadn't played GLC in a while. I built a couple extra decks and had let some friends borrow them. My friend Eddie played my Fire Mill deck that I had built based off the one on the website that Andrew posted over there on the GLC website. And that deck is crazy. I don't know, Azul, if you've kept up with GLC really
No.
much at all, but with the new Charizard that doubles your fire energy, there's a Moltres that you discard all the energies attached to it, and then you mill that many cards, and then there's the Centiskorch that you mill however many cards for how many energies are attached to the Centiskorch, and it doesn't get discarded. So if you just with Embor load up those energies, with Charizard double those energies, you're milling a ton of cards every turn. It's kind of sick, actually.
Yeah, I haven't messed with GLC in a while, but yeah, 23 people, especially that's kind of sick to hear. It definitely seems like the the format is alive and well for sure. If tournaments are getting that many players outside of the Ohio area, where
Yeah.
the big tournaments were held in the GLC 1Ks or 2Ks, whatever it was that Full Grip was putting on. So that's pretty sick to hear.
It was also just fun to like go hang out and play Pokemon at a shop with my friends. That's like something I have been missing that I haven't done in a long time. So
Yeah.
glad I went out and got to do that, and makes me miss locals and league cups and challenges and stuff. I know Azul hates league cups and challenges, but makes me miss them. But regardless, we'll see what happens with those moving forward. But for now, we'll talk about the more premier events, the regional championships, and specifically the Liverpool Regionals, which are happening this weekend over in the UK. It is going to still be the current format. Crown Zenith does officially release this weekend. It comes out on Friday, but sets have to be available like they're not legal for play until 2 weeks after their release date. So Crown Zenith, even though it
Yeah.
comes out, will not be legal for Liverpool Regional. So it's going to be the same format that we've had for the last couple of regionals, that they had for their Stuttgart regionals, that we've had for our last few over here in North America. Are we expecting much to change, Azul? I mean, is it going to be a 30% plus Lugia meta again over there in Liverpool? Like, is there any reason to think it would be any different?
I don't think. One thing I will mention before we go into that: make sure you don't play any of the different art cards for
No, you can.
Liverpool. Yeah, you can't. That's what I'm saying. Make sure you don't.
Make sure
You
you
can.
don't. No, you can.
You
Yes.
no, you can't.
You
From
can.
the
We
Crown
talked
Zenith
about
cards.
this. The Crown Zenith cards, yes. So in
No,
Crown
because when
Zenith, hang on. In Crown Zenith,
go
there will
ahead.
be special. So this is kind of an interesting topic, I guess, because we had this issue come up with Lost Origin not too
You
long
couldn't
ago.
for Lost Origin, right?
Okay, so here's what the issue
All right,
was.
go ahead, break it down.
So let me explain what's happening because someone's probably confused. So, in this new set, Crown Zenith, which comes out this Friday, there are reprint cards from cards that are already exist in Standard. There's like an alternate full art Colress's Experiment, I think. There's like alternate full art of several other supporters. Like there's an Irida, I'm pretty sure. So there's like several relevant reprints that have just different special artworks. And there was a regionals in the US a few months ago. I think it was Peoria right before. It was like whatever the first one, or maybe it was Baltimore. I think it was Baltimore because it was
Yeah.
before Lost Origin was legal. There was reprint
Mhm.
cards in Lost Origin, and people were told they could not play those cards at Baltimore if they got their hands on them early, like from release weekend or whatever. But the reason for that is because the set had not officially released yet. The only way people could have had cards was from pre-releases. So you're allowed to play.
Oh.
You're allowed to play reprint cards in official tournaments after the official release date. And then all the other new cards don't become legal for play until 2 weeks after. So because Crown Zenith's official release date is this Friday, you can play those new alternate cards and stuff like that.
All right, if Chip's wrong, you know who to blame. It was not my fault. I thought it was the other way, but Chip sounds pretty confident. That makes sense to me. All right, so yeah, go ahead. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
Before we got into it, but yeah, Lugia moving forward into Liverpool. I mean, there's no reason for it to shift, right? There's no reason for it to not be 30%. I mean, it wasn't. I think one of the things, like, even though it was 30% of the meta, you always do have to kind of look at what are the best players at the tournament playing. And I think a lot of the top players in general were kind of playing Lost Box and Reggie's
Yeah.
at San Diego. So that was going to be a little bit of a pull, a little bit shift on what actually did well. So I mean, I don't think the percentage of Lugia played is going to change, but I think how well it does. Will this be like another? Is this going to be like the comeback for Lugia where there's like 6 of them in the top cut again? I think it depends on what the better players of the game choose to play. Right, that's going to be a pretty big pull on what ends up being in those top 8 slots.
So I guess my question would be, should people look at the fact, like, so Lugia is obviously incredibly powerful, right? It's pretty simple and straightforward to set up, and then once you get it set up, you can do so much. You can power up crazy attackers really efficiently. You can Stoutland to take extra prizes. You can Yveltal to one-hit KO anything, and even Lugia itself can do a ton of damage and discard stadiums. Like, it's like everything in the deck seems incredibly high power level. So all of that considered, so many of the top players have chosen to play other decks, like you mentioned. So should the general player base not look at that fact and then maybe adjust what they're choosing to play to that fact? Like, look at the fact, okay, all of this deck is incredibly powerful, but all of the best players in the world are choosing to play something different. If the best players in the world are not playing these broken cards, should I not just look to play something else as well?
Well, I think the reason, like, they're not playing decks that all of a sudden that just lose to Lugia. It's just like, I don't know. I think more people switch around with the mentality of like not playing the obvious BDIF just for the fact that you don't have to play a bunch of mirror matches. And there's still a ton of very good players who are still playing Lugia.
course,
So
yeah.
you will still have to go through those players. And all these people who are choosing not to play Lugia know that as well. So not picking decks that all of a sudden just have like an unfavorable Lugia matchup. I actually do think someone asked me this question of like, or somehow the topic came up kind of like, should the average player play Lugia? And I think when I thought about it and kind of had the discussion with someone, I don't think you should. I think if you consider yourself an average player, the last deck you should play is probably Lugia. Yeah,
Or
if you
like
consider
maybe
yourself a
could you
player
just
who's trying
blanket
to,
say like if you consider yourself an average player, you should not play whatever the top deck of the format is, or is that just to this specific format?
I think it's when it's like 30%. So like the Palkia, I would agree with it in Palkia format. I'd agree with it in the current format. And probably would agree with it. Maybe I wouldn't agree with it as much in the Mew format though, because I feel like actually Mew took like no better way to say it, took some of the skill out of the game. When you sat down with Mellow and Mew against anything, you definitely took some of the skill out of the game by playing Mellow and Mew. So I don't think that applies to Mellow and Mew, but Palkia and Lugia, I think for sure. There's the Lugia mirror specifically. I feel like there's some outplaying, of course, and of course, the better player does come out on top more often than not, which is a good thing to still see. But yeah, I think if you're, when I say average play, I think if you're a player who's like pushing to try and get to day two, if that's your goal is to try and get to day two, your first day two, or just try and get to day two, and then once you get there, that's kind of what you're hoping for, and anything past that is kind of just like whatever. And I feel like Lugia is just like a really bad play for that. I think something like Reggie's Arceus Duraludon, maybe something like Makani's Arceus deck. I haven't played too much with that. Would also be a better play, or even Lost Box if you're really comfortable with it. I think Lost Box is one of the harder decks to play. I would definitely look at, if you're someone new to picking up Lost Box, look at Pablo's build, 'cause I think the Kyogre build is quite a bit harder to play than the Rayquaza build, and I don't even know if it's worth it. Like at this point, I almost feel like it's not worth it to play Kyogre when you could just play the Rayquaza build. To be honest, 'cause I think the Rayquaza deck is really really good. I don't even know if Kyogre is actually better than it. So, and it's definitely like Rayquaza is easier to manage than Kyogre. So, yeah, I would say consider a deck. Like, I think there's no reason if you're like I said, if you're a player who's pushing for, you're just kind of pushing for day twos. You're not trying to, do really well. Like, you don't expect to kind of make day two and then try and do well in day two. And I think playing Lugia is just a mistake, to be honest. I think like for how it'll play out, uh, on average, you probably won't have you making day two. I feel like I had this discussion with someone about like, should those kind of players, should that level of player be playing something like Lugia? And after I kind of talked about it and thought about it, I think the answer is no. You should be playing something like the Reggie, like an Arceus Duraludon. If your goal truly is to make day two, if your goal is to kind of show up with your Lugia and play Lugia deck and play your Lugia deck and do your best, that's a little bit different. But if your goal is truly to do as best as you can, and you feel like you're at that level of a player, I don't think I would play Lugia. I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, and I would also say like if I mean we talked about people going to their first regionals and stuff like that a couple weeks ago, about like deciding what deck to play. I don't think like you should listen to Azul saying this and like all of a sudden panic change what deck you're playing
Yeah.
necessarily. Like if you're going to your first regionals in Liverpool and you're like I've been practicing Lugia for 2 months and Azul's telling me to play something different, like no, stick to what you've been practicing. But it's just all about what level of player you're at. If you're someone
Yeah.
who's um and when we're talking about level of players, we're not trying to like talk down to anyone by any means. Like it's just a fact. People are at different levels.
Yeah.
Someone who's playing in their first regionals is not going to be as good at Pokemon as Azul is, who's won 5 regionals, right? So, which is okay, and that's just kind of the nature of our game is that we've got a huge variety of skill base in every single one of these tournaments. So, if you're a
And I
new
would say,
player or if you're an average player or if you're a top player, like the way you go about choosing a deck is totally different.
and one more thing I would add to that is like my mindset has recently changed on that. Like, before, because I had the discussion with someone at San Diego. Like before San Diego, I would have said for the majority of people, I think Lugia would be a fine deck. But it was just like I had this like an interesting conversation with someone, um, and that was kind of, and I never really thought about it in kind of the way they kind of asked me some questions, and that was what kind of triggered me to like think about it like further and a little bit more in depth. The questions they kind of asked me, led to me going down like this thought process of well, and that's where I'm currently at. I would say like decks, if I had to like pick out through the past couple formats, like I think in the Mew format, Mew was fine, but like once you get to the Palkia format and now the Lugia format, I would say, yeah, if you're that level of player, which I think there's a like I don't know, you could say 50% of the players, maybe not 50%, maybe like 30% of the players fall into that category.
Probably, yeah.
Because there's a lot of people who show up to these Pokemon events and have no plans of making day two. And if some will, of course, but they know that's not on their checklist, right? They're just kind of showing up to play Pokemon, right? For a lot of players, that is it. But for like the more competitive players, so maybe 30% of the people show up to a tournament, maybe 25%. You're trying to push for your first day two or trying to be consistent about making your next day two or whatever. Then obviously once you get to day 2, you do the best you can. But I think Lugia is just a bad deck choice in those situations. I think even if you get to day 2 with the Lugia, you're not going to ever do well. I don't think. I think you have to be like a step above as far as being a Lugia, you have to be a step above as far as a player level goes to consistently make day 2s with something like Lugia, and then also consistently do well in a day 2 once you get there. So, but yeah, my mindset on that could change. But that's where I'm currently at with that right now. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend kind of anyone plays. And like I said, I don't play Lugia at all the events myself. And I wouldn't recommend anyone play. So I guess I'm recommending nobody plays Lugia, to be honest. It sounds like a miserable experience on top of just being, I think, a bad choice um, for average players. And I think it's even a poor choice for more advanced players as well. But I know some people disagree with me on that kind of stuff. But yeah, don't play Lugia.
So looking at the tournaments in this format so far, we've got, and I'm gonna switch screens here. Okay, so we're not going to talk about the Asia tournaments because I feel like those metas are pretty separate from our metas on the like western part of the world. So we're not going to talk
Mhm.
about like the Indonesia or Asia Open or any of the tournaments in Japan or anything like that. So we've got Sao Paulo, we've got Stuttgart, Brisbane, Toronto, Arlington, and San Diego. Those are the tournaments we're looking at in this current format. Two of them were won by Lugia. And both of the players who won with Lugia, obviously Tord, who many people would consider one of the best of all time, and then Connor Fenton, who's a very good player from the U.S., who's been a Day 2 Worlds competitor in the past, auto Day 2 qualifier. So both people who have won with Lugia are very good players. Do you think, like, I mean, it's not likely that we're going to see some, like, unknown, like, not great player come up and win with Lugia, I feel like, right? I feel like it's, and maybe that's true for any deck, like, if we're looking at the names of all of these winners, I recognize a decent amount of them, I feel like. I don't know. Do you feel like it's likely that if Lugia wins the event, is it going to be from a really good player, or do you think like an okay player will win the tournament with Lugia?
I think it's more likely that it'd be like a known name, for sure.
Like if someone like
Um,
Stefan or Tord, right, rolls up and decides
yeah,
to play the
yeah.
deck.
Yeah, if anyone like that decides to play Lugia, they could definitely walk away with the event win, unless any of them come up with a deck that like auto wins the Lugia matchup. You have to auto win like so many different versions of Lugia that have like different stuff to have to deal with. So, yeah, I think so. I think when you're more likely to see the names that you don't see as often, it's usually when they bring something a little bit different. Um, for sure. That's like one this usually the decade. But yeah, I think for the Lugia, yeah. I mean, I think it makes sense, but it has a track record so far. Actually, something interesting about the other ones where Lugia hasn't won is Vikavolt's been in the finals.
So
Oh,
that was the
Vikavolt was in the
next,
finals of
yeah,
the other one. Vikavolt's won 2
yeah,
of the 4 major tournaments that we're talking about, right?
yeah, 5 major tournaments because Brisbane in there
A
too.
5.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I wasn't counting Sao Paulo, actually. That's one I missed.
Oh yeah, yeah. So
I
four
don't know.
regionals
Brisbane's
plus
so
the
weird.
international.
Brisbane's so weird because I feel like their meta, maybe we almost should, like, not to diss on Australia, but their metas are weird because, and I think this tournament really,
Less players and less
um,
events, right?
yeah, less players, less events. And I've talked to Natalie about this before. It's like I mean, a lot of players play the top decks, but it's like more so in Australia that a lot of players are going to play the top deck. So I'd actually be curious to have actually known what the day 1 percentage of Lugia was in Brisbane, because I feel like it could have been, maybe was higher than what we've seen at the 30% everywhere else. But I know Natalie mentions that all the time, is that everyone's always bringing the best deck. So we saw the counters come through and do really, really, really well in Australia. Like there was obviously some funky stuff going on there. I guess that whole weekend was a little bit funky though in general, right? Even in North America and then Stuttgart, the funky stuff was happening
Yeah.
no matter what.
So
That was just a funky weekend.
so you mentioned Vikavolt,
Yeah,
which is,
Vault.
yeah, not Vikavolt, Vikavolt, right? So yeah, I mean it's won 2 regionals. It got second at another one.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, and I feel like even going into San Diego, especially, nobody was really even. It wasn't. It was like people knew about it, but it wasn't on their radar. Like people weren't prepping for it. People weren't like, a lot of people weren't really considering playing it. I don't feel like, right? Is that something that should be different now? Like, is this a deck that is going to take up some percentage of the meta share, and or maybe should it? Because I mean, its finishes are insane when you consider probably how many people were actually playing these decks. Its finishes are
yeah.
super strong.
Yeah, I mean, so there's 2 different builds. There's the
Right.
Mateus build, which is the Vikavolt Palkia, which, to be honest, I would love, Mateus, if you're out there and you hear this and you want to make a comment on it, how do you beat Lugia with this deck if they have Dunsparce? If the answer is you don't, and no one had Dunsparce that weekend, that makes sense. But the other build with the Aerodactyl, obviously your win condition is the Aerodactyl. Aerodactyl. We saw Kreckler playing that initially, got second place to Connor. We could have seen it win back-to-back tournaments, to be honest. It would have been interesting if Kreckler had beaten Connor. Because if you watch those games, it's not like, oh, wait, Kreckler's deck actually sucks and Lugia just beats it. Kreckler just didn't draw very well, never really had a chance based on the draw, right?
Yeah.
And then we saw kind of a different story from Gibby, but Gibby didn't end up hitting the Lugia, hit the Mew in the finals. But that matchup's actually pretty good for the Vikavolt deck,
Yeah.
Vikavolt Aerodactyl deck. So yeah, so Vikavolt actually ended up taking it down overall in San Diego. And I think like I even said on the cast before San Diego, I was like, I think the deck seems decent. I just haven't had time to test it. So
It seems like it has a
against
good
the
Lost
broader
Box
meta,
matchup as well, right? Like
yeah, you got a good Lost Box.
Lost Box hates not being able to play their
Yeah.
item cards. And you've got a pretty consistent game plan of just, with the Zapdos, do 60 damage to a Comfey, and then KO it with Zigzagoon, and then you take another 2 prizes or lock another Comfey up for another turn. And
Yep.
there's like not, like the Lost Box deck can't do anything about it. Or is there something that the Lost Box deck can do about it that people haven't utilized just yet?
Well, I think the card to play, to be honest, if you're playing the Rayquaza build, is the Zapdos V that Nicholas Moffat played in their build and lost to Gibby on the win in. I think there was definitely room for Nick to have taken that series actually overall. So could have actually ended up taking the win against Gibby, and then who knows how the tournament would have ended. But yeah, I think if you're playing the Rayquaza build, Zapdos V, I think gives you it seems to probably give you about a 50-50, to be honest. After kind of watching how that set played out, it definitely seems like you could get that pretty close to a 50-50 overall. So I would say if you're playing the Rayquaza build, consider it. And I think definitely as Lugia, decks are getting cheesier and cheesier. We're seeing more cheese do well. I mean, I wouldn't recommend Eternatus Wheezing. I wouldn't play that, but if you're looking for some cheese to beat Lugia with. But that Vikavolt Aerodactyl seems very solid at winning. So I would definitely consider Cologne in Lugia for sure. That's where I'm going with this for this weekend. I would definitely consider it because Vikavolt Aerodactyl, I think, has definitely finally established itself as a solid deck. I think after Kreckler 1, people were like, really? And then no one really gave it the time of day. And then, Gibby picked it up, wins this. I think that definitely you have to look at it now, right? And be like, okay, the deck's probably pretty decent in the current format overall. And how do you beat it? And if you could do something besides Cologne, like if you can already figure out a way to kind of beat the matchup without having to put the tech cards in like Cologne in Lugia, that's even better. But if the only way to beat it consistently is something like Cologne, then I would say definitely consider it because I think I wouldn't be surprised to see a decent amount of Vikavolt Aerodactyl at at Liverpool for sure.
Yeah, imagine your Vikavolt Aerodactyl or Vikavolt Aerodactyl. You pull off your turn 1 into turn 2 Aerodactyl VSTAR play, and then your Lugia opponent just goes canceling Cologne, that Aerodactyl that you just attacked with, and then use my VSTAR power anyway.
And knock him out, yeah.
It's just, that seems, and there's more uses for it too. I think that's where you have to, when you're determining what cards are worth playing, especially when you're in a tournament like this where we're multiple tournaments into the format, people are trying to find unique ways to innovate their lists, right? Whenever you're trying to find those cute cards to include, you have to try to find cards that have multiple uses for multiple matchups, right? Where if you're just playing Cologne because it only counters Aerodactyl V-Star, that's probably not worth it because this is a deck that's going to be 5% of the meta or less, right?
Yeah.
But, you look at Cologne and it has value against Weezing, like you mentioned. It has value against Manaphy if you're playing the Amazing Rare Raikou in your list, right? Because, there's combos you can pull off there. So
it also beats Arceus Duraludon.
Arceus Duraludon, a Miltank. There's so many potential random uses for the card that starts to feel like something that is more worth playing than, I don't know, what other option there would really be. It just starts to feel like a good card to include if if we expect some of this deck to show up in Liverpool.
Yeah, if I was going to Liverpool, I wouldn't play Lugia personally. But if I had to, if for some reason I was forced to play Lugia, I would play Canceling Cologne, I think, this weekend. Just beats all the cheese, don't have to worry about it. And just you have it answers all the cheesy situations.
So do you think you would still be leaning towards Lost Box Kyogre most likely this weekend? I know you probably haven't been prepping like you would normally before regionals because you're not actually going, but just kind of thoughts after you're playing another tournament with it a couple weekends ago.
Probably I would play more around with Pablo's Ray build, and then I think Reggie would is also like would be a play would probably those would probably be like my top three to pick from would be like Reggie's, Pablo's Ray deck, and then Lost Box Kyogre. With Lost Box Kyogre being at the top, for sure. And if you play Lost Box Kyogre, definitely make sure you get yourself a Dragonite V because that card is super sick, and I definitely think needs to be included.
It's kind of cool because the Dragonite like fixes all of the matchups problems, right? Like
Yeah,
it makes your Arceus Duraludon matchup actually something that you can win. It's like, same goes for like Lost Zone Gudra, if that's a deck you have to worry about now, right? Like that's a card that'll be good in that matchup. It is good against Ice Cube because it has Shred. Like there's just a lot of
yeah,
uses for the card for sure. And at the end of the game, just randomly, you can also just do 250 damage to something to win,
yeah.
which is sometimes all you need is to just do 250 or 280 with a choice belt to close out the game.
Yeah,
Um,
sometimes just hitting hard at the end is all you need. Yeah, so it's great. It's a great card overall. So make sure you include it if you play Kyogre.
so you mentioned Reggie's, you mentioned Lost Box, and I think the question would be probably for a lot of people, which if you want to play a one prize deck, those are obviously the two to go with. Even though there's multiple versions of Lost Box, I mean, are we sleeving up Comfy or are we sleeving up Regigigas? What's the move?
Um, I think this might come down to a little bit to the player. Like if you have time with Lost Box, I would play a Lost Box build, except for Sablezard. If you're picking between Reggie's and Sablezard, play Reggie's. But if you don't have the time or haven't had the time to work on playing Lost Box, then I would say go with Reggie's for sure. Like if you're somewhat familiar with Reggie's and you don't have as much time to commit to the game before Liverpool, then go with Reggie's for sure. I think Reggie's is in a pretty solid spot right now. I don't think it's gonna really change. There's not a huge target on Reggie as far as like Lugia decks teching for it. I think people are kind of already it feels like people are already kind of set with their Dunsparce and Manaphy's. Like either you're a Dunsparce Manaphy player or you're not. So yeah, I would say rock the Reggies if you got less time, haven't really had time to play around with Lost Box and get familiar with it, or if you do have the time, then yeah, play some kind of Lost Box for sure.
So do you think it's worth going like a more straightforward, consistent route like we see from Darren O'Meara's top 8 list, which I think is really similar to your list that you won the tournament with online a couple weeks ago? Do we go just like straightforward, consistent, and more streamlined, which is what I would call this list, or do you add a couple little texts, which is what we saw from a lot of players like Isaiah Rahul and then Drew Kennett, who got top 16, who was playing both the Cape of Toughness and the Lost Vacuum?
I guess I would consider the cape because it feels like every Reggie player might be playing cape, so you maybe just kind of have to play it to give yourself a chance in the mirror. So I guess maybe rock the cape. Um, but yeah, I think that would. I don't know if I'd go the vacuum. I don't know if I'd go as far as adding the vacuum in there. The vacuum is nice because it does allow you to beat the Shadow Rider Collapse Stadium combo that basically no one plays, so it's not really like a thing you have to worry about too much.
Yeah,
Even like
yeah.
we saw in Makani's list, like Makani didn't even play the combo in the Arceus deck, the cheese Arceus deck. So yeah, I would say probably don't need the vacuum, but you might have to include the cape. I wouldn't want to play the cape because it's not that good. It's good in mirror. It's okay against Lost Box, but you don't really want to play it because it's just really not that good of a card. You'd rather play just more consistency. So, but you might have to include it if every other Reggie player is going to play it. So that's kind of like the question, I guess, which I don't know where people are kind of at with that, but it does seem like most people are playing it. So you kind of maybe have to. But we did see, like you said, Darren did not play it, right?
Right, right.
So the one person with like out cape
Made
towards
top
the top
8,
half
yeah.
with the Reggies made the top 8. So maybe no cape is the way. With a little bit of extra consistency, you never know, I guess.
So the next question, you've mentioned this deck a couple times, but are any Arceus decks worth playing? And the two main ones to talk about, it feels like, are definitely Makani's Arceus Counters deck with Aerodactyl, Flying Pikachu, Espeon, Empoleon, Drapion, all those things, or Arceus Duraludon, which Grant Shin is a diehard believer in, it feels like, at this point after getting top 32 and then top 4 just a couple weeks later. And
Um,
I mean, I think for me personally, I said this all weekend on the broadcast while we were watching along through the tournament in San Diego. Was like, I think Makani's deck is super super cool. It's got a lot going on though, and so I wonder if there's a way to take Makani's deck and like narrow it down a little bit, because we've got a 4/3 Arceus and then just 15 one-ofs in this deck.
yeah, I don't know. There might be a way. You have to give up on some matchups if you want to do that. I don't know if you really want to do that because
Yeah.
every tech card you play, it's like 2 tech cards per matchup. So then you don't just win all the matchups, but it gives you a shot. Um, I kind of like the all the techs that are currently in there. The Yveltal's a little bit interesting. I'm not sure what matchup you're really getting ahead with and with that one, but that one's interesting. I would say that I think Arceus Duraludon is definitely the more consistent choice, and I think the meta is like slowly getting better and better for Arceus Duraludon as well.
Oh, say it
Um,
isn't so, Azul.
it is getting better for it. I'm not a huge fan, but I would say it's actually a pretty solid play right now. Arceus Duraludon is, so I don't hate Arceus Duraludon. It really does just come down to what is the Lugia player across from you playing. But I feel like less people are playing the answers to Arceus Duraludon. But if they're bringing the canceling clones, all of a sudden you might be in trouble.
It's true.
Canceling clone does get the job done. So it kind of depends on always what the like. There's nothing you can't really tech for the Lugia players. You play your two Parasols. You try and get them on your Duraludon VMAXs, and you kind of hope that they don't have an aggressive answer to them or an answer to like two of your Duraludon. So,
I mean, I don't know.
um,
Duraludon doesn't have an amazing Lost Box Ray matchup, which is the most popular way for people to play Lost Box, right? And then does it even have a good Lost Box Kyogre matchup now that Kyogre should have Dragonite in the deck, right? Does that.
the Dragonite does make things tough. I think Arceus Duraludon players should start to play Lost City though. Like that should be like a you can add those to make things a little bit harder for the Lost Box players. We saw Lesage was actually playing the Lost Cities. Grant Shen wasn't, but I it's one of the cards Grant Shen says that they wish that they had played with some Lost Cities. So I would say yeah, I mean it makes it a little bit easier. If you're still getting one hit KO, there's nothing you can do about that, and you will just kind of lose. But like Ray is not like there is the Ray build, there's the Kyogre build, they have the Dragonites. I mean, like I said, the Lost Box matchups are like they're not it's not terrible. Like if you just play for Marnie and throw Marnie at them over and over again, you just kind of hope that they don't get
Right.
the one hit KO. So I guess I probably would like say I would also say like probably play for Marnie in Arc Duraludon as well. And not all I know not all lists are playing four right now, but probably for the sake of your Lost Box matchup, play four. It'll make it that matchup a little bit better. And you kind of beat up on some of the builds, like you beat up on Sablezard, and builds like that. So other builds of Lost Box, you do just kind of beat up on. So that's kind of cool, I guess, for it. But yeah, I mean, the Ray build can be tough, but I mean, uh, Grant did take down Pablo in top 8, I believe. Despite Pablo's mistake, I don't think Pablo would have been able to win that matchup. So you know,
I think
it's not
Pablo actually
impossible.
was going to win game two because he had the fifth different type of energy in deck. Like he
Yeah, no,
would.
but even if he got the KO, I don't think he had enough gas left to close it out.
It was getting
Um,
low. Yeah, that is true.
yeah. So like, yeah, I mean, like the Ray players, they need a lot. Like they don't need to do just the one hit KO once because it's pretty easy for you to set up to. It's pretty easy for you to set up both of your V maxes, and then to get the Ray one hit KO back to back while you're martying them can be pretty tough to pull off, to be honest.
I don't know. Maybe the meta is setting up all right for Arc Duraludon. This is the closest to a positive comment I've ever heard Azul give for Arceus Duraludon. But a deck we have not talked about yet that actually did get second place in San Diego and probably is Arceus Duraludon's worst matchup of the meta decks is Mew VMAX. Mew is kind of in an interesting spot, I feel like, in the meta. It's been the second most played deck for every single tournament, but it has been decreasing in meta share. Its finishes have not been the best in this format overall, and it feels like more and more of the people, the top quote unquote top players who have been playing the deck have moved away from the Mew as the format has moved on. Are we at a point now where things are coming back around to where Mew is feeling a little better? I feel like for San Diego and Arlington, the Mew believers were kind of off it because Drapion was pretty highly anticipated. Are we kind of coming back around though? Is Mew starting to feel like a better play potentially, especially after seeing Nathan Ginsburg get second place?
Um, I think it probably yeah, it's probably just like has to do with how much Drapion there is, right? So I think a lot of people were scared. I mean, there wasn't. It was still like the second most popular deck of the tournament, right? It was still like 11% or something.
Yeah.
I think it was even a lower percent at lower percent played at. No, I might be wrong on that. Might have been higher percent played at
Yeah, I
Arlington.
think it's
But
right around 11-12 is what it's been.
yeah, Drapion stocks aren't super high, so I don't expect it to be super popular. Which means I think Mew's like pretty solid right now in the format. Yeah, I don't think there's gonna be a ton of Drapion. Just kind of about. There's really no reason for there to be. It's mostly out of most of the Lugia builds. I know Riley still played it. Sablezard is like the worst build of Lost Box right now, which is the only build that consistently played the Drapion. Rayquaza can one-hit KO Mew, but it's pretty tough to do. And if you have the what's it called on your bench, they need 5 energy or to clean it up with Sableye or set up with Sableye beforehand if they have the Oricorio down. So I think Mew, and then you can Roxanne them. So I think Mew is actually like pretty good against Ray. It's really bad against Kyogre Lost Box, but you're pretty good against Ray. So and even then your Kyogre matchup isn't terrible. I think it's just like Kyogre's like reasonably favored. So yeah, I think Mew is kind of, and if you could even add in like a tech for that matchup if you really wanted to, right? Like we saw Xander Perot's build, the advanced technology Mew is what Xander called it. It has a Manaphy in there, and then the biggest card I think is that it has the 1/1 Aerodactyl in the list. And the biggest exclusion I would say from the list is there's no cross switches, but I think the bigger exclusion is there's no choice belt in the list.
Yeah.
Um, but there's a big charm, and I think actually the big charm is pretty good. It's good against Mew. It's good on the Mew to stop Lugia from one hit KOing you, and it's also good against Regis. Like Regigigas can't one hit KO you. You've got a big charm on your Mew, which is actually that's pretty good. That's a pretty big to gain like one extra turn in that matchup while you have like Lost Cities going and stuff, getting rid of their Regis. So yeah, I think Mew's actually in a pretty like as far as Mew goes in this format, I think Mew's actually in a pretty solid spot overall.
Now, if you're rolling up with the Mew, are you rolling up with the advanced technology? Are we are we rocking the Aerodactyl and the Manaphy in the deck? I do think that if the Kyogre player does not know you have Manaphy, that is like a card that can swing the matchup for you for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I haven't played any with. If I was gonna play Mew, I would definitely play something like that for sure. I
Yeah,
maybe just
you
take.
wouldn't play
If I was
just a
gonna play
vanilla
Mew,
list. Yeah,
I would probably play Xander's. Like I'd probably play Xander's build if I was gonna play Mew. But then yeah, like we saw, it did get second place.
Nathan.
Nathan Ginsburg, which is a more, um, I don't want to say traditional. I guess yeah, more what you would expect in this
Right.
current meta. The cross switchers, path cities. I guess the one thing that you don't see very often, there was a collapsed stadium in there, which is like really good against the lost box matchups. The collapsed stadium is. Besides that, it really is like the judge path Mew, one of Parasol in there as well, and down to one choice belt. So getting closer to the no choice belt where Xander was at. So yeah, more what you'd expect from the Mew that did get second place. But if I was to play Mew at a tournament, I would definitely play something like what Xander's got. I think for sure, just to play something cheesy.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Mew's actually pretty favorably positioned right now. I think it does fine into Lugia. I think it probably does fine into the Vikavolt deck. If they, well, I don't know. I think like Gibby played it really well, and if people if they're wanting to play the Vikavolt deck and they want to know what to do in the Mew matchup, I think you watch Gibby's game, right? You just try to go
Yeah,
2-2-2 or 2-3-2, whatever works, right? Where you go Raikou take something out or Drapion take something out, and then Ditto V into whichever one of those two attackers they didn't lost zone and do it again, right?
yeah.
Is kind of
It
the
definitely
strat.
seems with the list that Gibby played specifically, there's no vacuum in it like Kreckler had, which I think is actually a really big deal for winning that matchup. Because at the end of
Mm.
the game, they can Roxanne you plus Path. So if you don't have a way to get to bump the stadium, you just kind of lose. There's only one training court in this list for for Gibby, so and you can't find that off Mew. So I'm actually the vacuum actually seems like a pretty good inclusion to help for the Mew matchup, to be honest. So actually, I haven't watched the finals yet. I do plan to watch it on stream as soon as I'm not sick. So hopefully later today, because this will be going up Tuesday tomorrow for right now. But yeah, I'm interested to see how it ended up being played out because I feel like there is an opportunity to just kind of go Roxanne path and maybe shut them out of the game. But depends on how the attackers get set up on Gibby's side. But yeah, with only the training court as a stadium bump, paths can be pretty rough to deal with when you have to use Drapion and you're potentially trying to use Ditto at some point to recover an attacker.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see how things will play out in Liverpool. I guess we can quickly talk about just some of the other decks, right, that made day two. We've talked about Lugia, Lost Box, Regis, Arceus, and Mew. But if we look at the other 5 decks that made day two in San Diego, we've got Vikavolt, which we did talk about. So we've got 4 decks. We've got Palkia, Hisuian Gudra VSTAR, Eternatus, and 1 Mad Lad with the Origin form Dialga VSTAR in day 2. I don't know. Of those 4, Azul, why don't we do this? Why don't we rank the 4? Like it the most as a play, dislike it the most as a play. What's the most likable as a play for Liverpool this weekend in your mind of those 4?
So is it Dialga, Gudra, Eternatus, and
Palkia.
okay? So I think Palkia would be number 1, and then it would be Dialga, then Gudra, and then Eternatus. I think would be my number 4. Do not play Eternatus unless you're like okay with going 0-4. Like unless you're gonna have fun going 0-4. I think the Eternatus Weezing is actually a terrible deck. I think it's literally awful. You're unfavored against Lugia, and you're unfavored against you're unfavored against Kyogre Lost Box. The other builds of Lost Box you have a little bit better of a time. But yeah, your Lugia matchup is just unfavorable. I think like pretty solidly. Like it's like 60-40 or something Lugia. So yeah, do not play Eternatus Weezing. If you want to play a Weezing deck, just play Quad Weezing. It's so much better. You go from unfavored against Lugia to auto winning Lugia. So pretty big difference.
Azul's hatred for Arceus Duraludon has passed on to Eternatus for this week at least. We'll see what his opinions are after Liverpool next weekend.
But yeah, I mean Gudra's kind of cool. I don't think it's great, but you can stand up against enough of the decks in the format. It's not the next cool deck though. Despite the Sosa's doing pretty well with it in day 2. And then what Dialga actually seems like, I don't know, Dialga might be some kind of like sleeper deck, to be honest. I don't know. Maybe Dialga's like actually pretty decent. I'm not sure. Yeah, Derek Schwartz got top 32 with it. They were like up there for a little bit going into the later rounds, right? To potentially even push for like a top 8 finish. And then I think Palkia is still solid. Palkia is still solid. We saw a couple decent finishes out of players at San Diego with that as well. So yeah, I'd pick Palkia as my number 1 if I was picking between those 4 for sure.
I just went over to Derek's Twitter, and the very first thing on his page after his pinned tweet, which is obviously the top 32 finish with Dialga, his most recent tweet from today is Dialga versus Lugia, and it's a twit longer, and the very first line is Lugia is not a good matchup. Is the very first line. So Derek recognized the situation. I actually think I saw Derek posted this funny meme from Discord or something. He says of Origin form Dialga facing up against all of the matchups, and it's like Lost Box unfavored, Lugia unfavored, Reggie's never lose. Like Reggie's is an insanely good matchup, I feels like, for Dialga, because Reggie's cannot one-shot you, and you at some point in the game will just take 2 turns in a row, and so you would just automatically get ahead in the prize trade, assuming you can pull off a turn to attack, right? Which is not super hard for the deck.
Yeah, and you have 2 Averys, so you can take 5 of their or 4 of their Reggies out of play in 1 turn.
And then Mew unfavored, Duraludon unfavored, other probably fine. Gudra favored. Okay. Arceus Dex unfavored. Palkia unfavored. Eternatus, because it's a bad deck, favored. And then Giratina VSTAR on here for some reason, unfavored. So, I mean, can you really roll up to a regionals in this current format with a deck that even the Dialga Prophet himself is saying does not have the best matchups into the field?
I mean, I'd rather go 0-4 with Dialga than 0-4 with Weezing Eternatus, because it's a lot more fun to be playing Dialga than Weezing Eternatus. Ascension, I get knocked out. Okay, game's over. At least with Dialga, you get to use Star Chronos.
I think for me, if I'm ranking those 4 decks that we just mentioned, I'm going to be a pretty similar lineup to you. I'm definitely saying Palkia number 1. It's just probably of those 4 the most well-rounded deck, right? And then I would go Gudra over Dialga, just swap those 2, and then Eternatus last for me personally, because I mean, as someone who played so much Mega Rayquaza back in the day, and Eternatus obviously has so many parallels to Mega Rayquaza, it's just Eternatus just isn't it. It just really isn't.
Not that. Nope.
I think that's going to do it for Liverpool, though. I don't know, any other thoughts, any other decks you want to mention or shout out that you've like seen people talk about or that you've thought of the last week or so? Anything else you think we could see pop up in Liverpool?
Not that I can think of. I think that we pretty much covered everything. I think the format in general is pretty narrow. I
Yeah,
think
how
the
do you
biggest thing
feel
for
about this format right now overall, and the fact that we get Crown Zenith and that's it for like the next 3 months?
going to be pretty unfortunate. It's going to be a good old Darkness Ablaze into Vivid Voltage format where I said it might be even worse because I feel like there's less cool decks to play with. It's just like 30% of the meta for every major tournament is Lugia, and then nothing else really. There's a Lost Box, Mew, Reggie, and that's kind of it. And everything else under that is like not great, but it's like okay. A decent amount of fringe decks, I guess, but Lugia just constantly being 30% of the meta is kind of exhausting.
Yeah, whenever there's just one deck that's that high. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe if as the format continues, like if we see this trend continue on where Lugia makes like one or two top 8 spots for the next like 3 tournaments, maybe we'll see one of these tournaments dip under 20% Lugia. I don't think we're
Good.
probably ever gonna. We might see it get to around 20%, but I think it's unlikely we'll see it dip under that throughout the rest of
Yeah,
this like format until
I
rotation
think it.
happens.
Yeah, I think it'll probably stay close to 30 for the rest of the time, unless Crown Zenith does bring like a couple new decks, which is definitely possible. Crown Zenith could definitely bring.
Rotom
Um,
VSTAR, baby.
it definitely could bring a couple new decks potentially. I don't think so. Maybe just some stuff with Radiant Eternatus,
Yeah.
and maybe just one deck, if any decks. So not too much is probably going to change.
We'll see. And the set, like we mentioned at the beginning, does come out this Friday, and we're gonna be trying to. I mean, I'm gonna try to play some. Azul, I know, is definitely gonna be playing a bunch,
Yep.
so that way next week we can give kind of our first thoughts on some of those new cards because we're both excited. Anytime there's new Pokemon sets coming out, we're always excited to try the new different fun things. But from there, we
Definitely.
can move on to everyone's favorite segment of the cast. Guess that flavor text, where this week it is my turn to pick a card for Azul to guess what Pokemon it is. That's right. So I will read the flavor text from the bottom corner of a Pokemon card. Azul has to guess what Pokemon that card is featuring. He does get 3 lifelines to use potentially. The lifelines are what set the card is from, what stage the card is, and read an attack name. If you don't use any lifelines, you get 4 points. If you do, you get one less point for each lifeline that you use. I think the current score is me up 2, Azul,
Yeah.
down 2. So there's a chance you could jump ahead here. I think there's only been like one time though that one of us has gotten more than one single point.
I don't think it's ever
So
happened. I think we've only ever gotten ones.
I feel like there was a 2 in there somewhere, but I can't remember for
Maybe.
sure. Regardless, I've got my card picked out, and if Azul, if you're ready, we can get into it.
I'm ready. Hit me with a chip.
All right. Blanks droppings are hot, so people used to put them in their clothes to keep themselves warm.
I know what Pokemon this is, but I can't remember the name. It's the fire Pokemon that evolves from the it's like a snow monkey. It looks like a monkey. But if we Obama, it's not Obama Snow. Dude, I know what it is. I'm stuck here. I know what Pokemon it is, but I don't remember the name.
That's kind
It's
of an important part.
yeah,
I'll
so
read it
it
one more time
is
for anyone
oh,
listening along at home, real quick.
yeah.
Blanks droppings are hot, so people used to put them in their clothes to keep themselves warm.
It's the basic of I can remember the evolution. The evolution is like it looks like a snow it looks like a yeti kind of. I don't remember the name of the Pokemon. The basic is called. What is the basic called? What is the name of the basic? This
Maybe
is
if you
so
use
hard
some
to.
lifelines,
No, because
you'll.
that's not gonna help me remember the name though. I know the Pokemon. I just don't know the
Oh,
name.
we're gonna need a guess at some point, Azul.
I guess we never like thought about what happened in these situations where I
Bro,
know
what
the
do you
Pokemon.
mean we never thought about what
I gotta
happened?
pick.
You don't get a point if you don't guess the Pokemon. It doesn't matter if you know what
What
it
is the
looks
name of the
like.
Pokemon? Oh my gosh. Oh, hang on. Let me think about it for a second. It looks like a. It looks like a. Oh, what is its name? I'm stuck. I can't even think about like a letter in its name. It's like a fire snow Pokemon. Kind of. I can't remember its name at all. Oh wait, Darmanitan. And then the pre-evolution of Darmanitan is the evolution, and the pre-evolution of Darmanitan is no. What is it? Darmanitan is the evolution, though.
Darmanitan is a Pokemon, yes.
Yeah, but Darmanitan is not the Pokemon. It's the evolution of Darmanitan. The pre-evolution, the basic. All right, I guess I'll use one of my lifelines here because I'm eating up so much time trying to remember what the name of the Pokemon. What stage is the Pokemon?
It is a
It's
basic.
basic. Oh, Darmanitan. The pre-evolution of Darmanitan is. What is it? I can't remember
we
what
gotta
it
put
is.
a timer on or something.
I
here.
know that's what I'm saying, but I can't remember it.
I'm putting 30 seconds on a clock.
I'll put him. Well, until I use
Give
the
me a minute.
lifeline.
I'll give you a minute.
Yeah,
All
give me a minute. Darmanitan and
minute going down. Ready, set, go.
Darmanitan. The smaller Darmanitan.
What if
Dude,
it's not
what
Darmanitan,
is
though?
what?
What if it's
What
not
if it's not
Darmanitan?
No, it is Darmanitan.
Well, it's not Darmanitan because it's a basic.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. It's a pre-evolution of Darmanitan.
Theoretically.
No, it is. I just don't remember its name. Darmanitan.
30 seconds.
I can't remember, dude. I remember what it looks like. It's in my head. No. I can't believe I'm throwing away these points. Darmanitan.
You might as well use your lifelines because you're about to get 0.
Yeah, what is its attack? Give me an attack name.
Fire breathing.
Fire breathing. Darmanitan evolves.
10 seconds.
Evolves from. Dude, I can't remember what it is. I can't remember what it's called. Oh, Darmaku. Darmaku.
All right.
Darmaku.
That I don't know. We're gonna need some audience
That was
help.
right.
His name is Darumaka, not
Darumaka. Yeah.
Darmaku.
That's good enough. That's close enough.
I don't know. I think we we need some help from the comments here. I mean, Azul, I don't know. You knew what the Pokemon was. You didn't know its name. You got Darmaku instead of Darumaka. Darumaka. It's not super similar. I don't know.
That's pretty close.
That's a 3-point swing, though. That's a.
No, I used 2 lifelines.
You did use. Okay, so it's a 2-pointer.
I did use 2 lifelines.
Yeah, that's a 2-pointer. You know what? I think we'll give it to you for sure.
All right,
that's fair.
dude.
You knew what it was. You did know what it was.
I knew what it was.
The important thing. But I will just ask,
gosh.
moving forward, you remember this generosity from me right now.
All right, I will remember. It does evolve into Darmanitan, right?
It.
I had that right too.
It does evolve into Darmanitan, but you were thinking of the snow version. There's like a Galarian form of it. So there's Galarian Darmanitan and Galarian Darumaka.
Dude, that was killing me that I couldn't remember the name. Darumaka's hard to remember though. Who would remember that? But I was there at the end. I don't even know where that came from too. I was just like thinking
Darmaku. That's gonna if they ever come up with a stage 2 for Darmanitan, it's gonna be Darmaku now, just for you.
Yeah. All right. Sorry for taking so long for everyone who's listening or watching. I did my best. Maybe
hey, we're
we'll
tied
edit
up
part
now.
of that
We're
out.
tied up, so
we are tied up now. You'll have your shot to pull out. You thought I wouldn't know that one, but I have the little redeem flavor text on my channel for a while now. That's one that people keep redeeming is Darumaka.
Dang,
but I didn't remember the name.
Dang, so you're like getting to study and stuff. I don't get that.
Well, they don't use it too often, but sometimes when I'm streaming, they'll but it's always like the same one. It's like
I
the
do have
same
to
ones.
give a shout out before we move on. That one came from that was a suggestion from a listener and a friend from Alex Wilson. Suggested this one for you, but and you almost
suggestions
didn't get
are almost didn't. It was close. But now both the couple times they've been suggested, I think we've always got it because you got the Crocorock that one time. Somehow you got Crocorock.
Oh, dude, that was the best spike of all time for sure.
That was insane. You applied like all of your Poke knowledge for that one. You're like, all right, it's a dark Pokemon. What is a dark Pokemon? But it's also a fighting Pokemon. Oh, the Crocorock. Oh, I guess. All right, let's go with Crocorock. Like, what? That was insane.
It worked out. And that one, the fact that I knew what set it was helped me. All right.
Yeah, exactly. All right, move
Moving
us
on,
along. Let's go
moving
ahead and
on.
get into it.
Yep, yep, yep. Let's move on from there into the new era of the Pokemon TCG. Scarlet and Violet base set cards have been revealed, and initial reactions, they're okay, right? I don't think there's anything in here that feels like it's going to be incredibly meta shifting. There are some good cards. Most of them are trainers though. Um and I think that that could be indicative of an intention to like scale things back, but also at the same time, when you think back to like past base sets, it's usually like one or two cards end up being pretty good, and then the rest of them are trainers, and then other than that, a lot of the Pokemon don't feel like they end up being super strong. Like if you think back to Sword and Shield base set, right? We got Zacian V, that was pretty good, and then we got
Yeah.
Lapras VMAX, Snorlax VMAX, um, Stone Journer VMAX. These cards were all okay, but none of them were amazing, right? Maybe
Yeah.
and even before that, if we think back to Sun and Moon base sets, we got like Solgaleo GX, Lunala GX, Tauros GX was probably one of the better ones. That was really good for a while.
Mhm.
Um, Other than that, nothing really. I mean, Espeon, I guess Espeon GX was really good. Umbreon GX was okay. I don't know. Is this something that people should be worried about? The fact that there doesn't feel like there's anything like game breaking in this new set.
Probably not. We're also getting hit with rotation at the same time. Something you have to remember. Thankfully, because if we didn't get hit with rotation, we'd probably have 9 months of Lugia dominance. So thankfully, we're getting hit with rotation. That's actually weird. Like Lugia won't probably see a World Championships. Maybe, right?
No, yeah.
Like that's like crazy to think. One of the most powerful like combination of the cards ever, Lugia Archeops, might not be played at Worlds. Maybe it will though. We'll see how it shakes out after rotation and what other special energy we get.
Yeah, there
The
will be
future
more
sets from
sets
there.
before Worlds, right?
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I guess like I've never really thought about that before, but maybe yeah, maybe that is what they try and do with the base sets is kind of lay the groundwork for a lot of the supporting cast in the form of the trainer cards, Nest Ball, Ultra Ball, stuff like that we're getting, and then they kind of build from there with the Pokemon they give us in the future sets, building up throughout the rest of the block or rest of the year, whatever you want to call it. So we'll see. Yeah, it doesn't. Besides Guard Force, it doesn't seem like anything's too powerful overall. But we can go ahead and take a look at some of the cards today. We're not going to look at all of them, but most of the ones that we think are interesting. First one is Arma Rogue.
Armor
Unless there's anything else you want to
Rouge,
say
I
about this.
think.
Arma Rouge. Did I get that right?
I think it's Armor Rouge.
Did you spell Rogue? And I know that's always a big thing is how you spell Rogue with
I
the
think
with the
that is
what's
how
it
you
called?
spell Rogue. Maybe it is Armor Rogue. I've always just thought it was Armor Rouge. I think it's Armor Rouge.
That makes more sense. No, that's not how you spell rogue. Rogue is GU, not UG. So you're right.
Okay,
Armor
okay.
Rouge. Um, yeah. So Armor Rouge. It's a stage 1 fire Pokemon. As often as you like during your turn, you may move a fire energy attached to one of your benched Pokemon to your active. It's got 130 HP. It's got the attack Flame Cannon for fire colorless. 90 damage to your opponent's active is now burned. So it's all about that ability, of course, moving fire energy from the bench to the active. And we do still have Magma Basin right
Yeah.
after rotation. So Armor Rouge plus Magma Basin plus Fire Attacker. I don't think we get any good Fire Attackers in this set. So you'd be fully relying on like everything we have currently in the format. But that's a really good ability when you combo it with Magma Basin for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Fire theoretically has some insane stuff, some insane options right
Rapidash.
now. I mean, Magma Basin, just one of the best stadium cards ever. Energy acceleration on
Yeah.
the stadium, insane. The fact that it's not being played right now is crazy, and it's all because there's just no incredible fire Pokemon. So
hmm
I don't think this is a card that's going to be good right now, but I think this is a card to remember it exists when some busted fire Pokemon comes out next year or something like that, right?
Yeah. We still
Um,
have Rapidash is like another thing to talk to with that. Is like
mhm.
we have Rapidash, discard fire energy, do 30 more damage,
Yes.
and it's just not good. I don't know if you'll be playing both of those in the same deck. Maybe you could do like a 2/2 of each, to be honest, in a deck. But yeah, an insane ability
And
and
that
nothing to use
synergy,
it with.
though, discard the energy with Rapidash, accelerate it with Magma Basin, move it with the Armor Rouge. Oh, insane. Insane.
Insane, absolutely insane. Yeah, so we'll need some more fire Pokemon. So we'll have to see at the future sets down the line. Up next, we got the Gyarados EX Stage 1 300 HP. I didn't think they were going to be doing the Stage 1 EXs like this. That's a lot of HP. Because the
It
Arcanine,
is.
the other one we've only seen so far, I think, is the one that only that I can think of off the top of my head is the Arcanine. How much
And
HP does the Arcanine have?
Lucario.
Arcanine's got 280. Lucario
I
has.
think Lucario had 260. And then some of the other EX stage ones that we'll talk about in a little bit, like Spidops and stuff like that, I think they have 260 ish around there. So
Yeah. So
this is
300
it's
HP.
a beefy boy.
That's like ridiculous. That's a lot. But if you're not doing very much damage, it's not going to matter. So take a look at the attacks. Water, 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 100 damage, and then water, 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 colorless, colorless, for 180 plus 180 more if your opponent's active Pokemon already has any damage counters on it. So you're doing 360, 370 with the damage already there at the very least. You're basically one hit KOing anything with that second attack. Water, 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 double colorless. That's a lot of energy though.
Yeah, yeah.
Does Frostmoth survive rotation? I don't
No.
know. No, so that might be tough to set up and actually utilize. But if you do get there, you are one Q and anything. And then, of course, we got to talk about this. It's got the effect, ability, whatever, the terrestrial attribute. This Pokemon doesn't take any damage from attacks while on the bench. So this basically, I think, confirms our biggest fears that the terrestrial attribute of, what is it, territorialization or whatever from the VGC,
Terastallization.
terrestrialization from the VGC, which like allows Pokemon to change their types, which would have been cool to see in the TCG where you had like a Gyarados that was like a terrestrialization of it and it was like a fire type, or I don't know, like that would have been cool to see, right?
Yeah.
But instead we have a water Gyarados that has the terrestrial attribute and it just protects itself while it's on the bench from damage, which is what we were afraid was going to be the outcome of it. I think that was basically what the video talking about the terrestrial attribute was hinting at, right? Was that it was just going to be bench barrier for that Pokemon, which unfortunately looks like that is what all the terrestrial attributes are going to be on all the Pokemon. So it seems like such a wasted mechanic, right?
Oh, an insane waste. Like there's so many things that they could have theoretically done. We could have gotten multiple different types of multiple cards. We could have gotten something similar to the Delta species mechanic of old. And we still could get something, right? Like trainer cards that interact with terrestrial Pokemon specifically. Like maybe there will be some sort of tool that will change a terrestrial Pokemon's typing. That's a possibility, I guess. But as of right now, like if this is it, this is massively disappointing.
Yes.
I mean, you think about, because every single Pokemon video game has a unique mechanic, and then every single time the Pokemon TCG tries to align itself with that mechanic in some way, right? So
Yeah.
in like X and Y, they got Mega Evolutions, and so we got Mega Evolutions in the Pokemon TCG, which ended up, there ended up being a lot of pretty solid Megas by the time X and Y was said and done. In Sun and Moon, it was Z moves. Z moves were never really the best in the TCG. We got those like Z Crystal tool cards. I don't think any of them were ever that good, so that one was a little bit of a miss, it feels like. Sword and Shield was Gigantamax or Dynamaxing, and that one was just pretty much VMAXs, and
Yep.
they looked different, some of them. So I mean, that one's okay. There's no special attribute, but like this is the most boring one of all. It's just the Pokemon, it's regular type, and it gets a bench bear. It gets like a third thing built in, right? Like, because every Pokemon will
Yeah.
have usually like two things, either one ability and one attack, or two attacks, something like that. So this gets a third thing built in. But if all of them, like, it would have been, I think this would have been okay if each terrestrial ability or terrestrial attribute was like different depending on what type
Yeah.
it was. Like, that's at least something. It's very similar to an old mechanic in the ancient traits, but that's at least something. This is just kind of like, this is boring. This is so boring.
Yeah. It's definitely very boring. And yeah, I mean, this does kind of hint at maybe this does feel like they're not going to give us bench barrier, is the way that kind of feels. But I guess we won't know for a little while because Manaphy doesn't rotate till next year, right? Next rotation, not the coming up rotation.
I think
So we'll have.
theoretically, Manaphy survives 2 rotations actually, because
Oh my gosh. We
'cause
have bench barrier, and then we also have these Pokemon that just can't be hit on the bench. Like, it's such a waste. It's insane. It's crazy. And also, we usually have had bench barrier the one we us and us outside of Japan have lost bench barrier for a time between Mew and Manaphy, but Japan, who their format is what the game is built around, and theoretically we're going to be on par with them for the format from here on out. Hopefully, that's what it seems like is maybe going to happen. Um, they never lost bench barrier. They went from Mew right into Manaphy. Right when they lost Manaphy, Mew they had Manaphy. So if they're just going to keep us having bench barrier and have this stupid ability, and then they made it to protect your Pokemon on the bench, it's just I don't know. It's just such a waste. It's such a
Yeah.
why even have it?
I
It
mean,
feels like they like
Manaphy.
had to put it in the game, and then they were like, "Well, we don't want to like work too hard on this. Let's just give them extra bench barrier."
Yeah, Manaphy is an F block card, so it will be around for a while. It's not gonna like because theoretically they'll rotate out one block each year. Now, there's nothing to say they can't rotate two blocks, right? If they want to go sooner to Scarlet and Violet on, say, in the
Yeah,
2024 season, they definitely could do that. But
maybe
for
they will.
now, if we're keeping on par with what we've seen from the last few years, it will likely be Manaphy is going to be around for a couple of years. So yeah, definitely very disappointing. Um, Hopefully there's something else to come. That's all I'll say is, like, hopefully there's some trainers or tool cards or supporters, like just something that interacts with Terrestrial to make it more interesting than just bench barrier for everything.
Yeah, that's super disappointing because we saw the first one on Arcanine, and then I think I saw it first on Tuan Lay's Twitter where they were like hinted at from what they translated from the like the video that was released in Japanese that it sounds like all Terrestrial is just gonna always just gonna be the bench protection, which sucks. If that's gonna be they bring this cool new mechanic. I was super hyped for it. I don't care if some of them had it. Like I was like excited that Arcanine had that, but I was hoping that the other ones, once you saw other Pokemon with the Terrestrial attribute, that they would give you something besides bench barrier. But it looks like that is not the case.
We'll keep it moving here. I'm kind of curious because I played the video game, so I've seen like pretty much all of these Pokemon. Azul has not though, so he might be seeing some of these Pokemon for the first time,
Yeah.
looking at some of these cards. Let's look at the Wiglet and the Wug trio. Azul, you got any big thoughts on Wiglet and Wug trio compared to Diglett and Doug trio?
No, I didn't know it was I didn't know it was a water Pokemon though. I
Yeah,
didn't know
yeah.
they were underwater.
It's
The
like
first one I
a
saw was a picture of it on the beach or something. I thought so.
yeah. I mean, the sand is right near the water, right?
I mean, no, they're chill. They're definitely chill.
So there's two Wiglets. The one I'm going to talk about just has a colorless attack. Flip a coin. If heads, discard the top card of your opponent's deck, and it evolves into Wug Trio for three colorless. Sea Tunneling. Flip three coins for each heads. Discard the top three cards of your opponent's deck. I don't know. What do you think, Azul?
I mean, probably not better than Durant for right now, but maybe in the future this will be the go-to mill deck. It's funny that the Wiglet's attack name, what it's currently translated as, is called Dig a Bit. It's just so it's definitely and the other one's Sea Tunneling. So
Dig a lit. Dig a
it,
bit.
so Wug Trio's going hard with the sea tunneling, where Wiglet's putting in a little bit of effort with just digging just a little bit. He's not tunneling too much, just a little bit. Just getting his quota in, and then he's checking out for the day.
We've got Dondozo and Tatsugiri. These Pokemon are really big in VGC. So the way they interact in VGC, Azul, because I know you probably don't know, is Tatsugiri's ability says that whenever it is on the field next to a Dondozo, the Tatsugiri hops into the Dondozo's mouth, and then it becomes like if you look at the Dondozo card, you see
Yeah.
Tatsugiri is in its mouth, and then its ability is called Commander. So Dondozo is like a really strong power Pokemon with high stats, but it doesn't know how to use them very well. So when Tatsugiri hops into Dondozo's mouth, it gains a bunch of stat boosts to make it even stronger.
Okay.
But yeah, and Dondozo's attack here in the TCG, Vent Wrath for two colorless, 50 times. This attack does 50 damage for each Tatsugiri in your discard pile. So, I mean, that's a good amount of damage for two colorless, and it's not super hard to achieve getting four Tatsugiri in the discard pile, I don't feel like.
Yeah, shouldn't be too difficult. And then the Tatsugiri, 70 HP. Got the preparations for a water energy. Set your deck for up to 2 basic water energy. Attach them to one of your bench Pokemon. Then shuffle your deck. So a little bit of a setup for your Dondozo. But yeah, we will lose Twin Energy when this comes out. So
Yeah.
that'll be like the biggest loss. But I guess if you got your Tatsugiri setting up your Dondozos, it might work. I mean, 200 damage every single turn on a one prize Pokemon isn't bad, especially with 160 HP.
Yeah.
So a good meme deck, I think, to look forward to.
Yeah, nothing crazy there. We talked about Gardevoir a couple weeks ago, so we won't go into too much depth of it here. If you want to hear our thoughts, there we did talk about it a couple weeks ago, like I mentioned. But I mean, yeah, this card seems like it's going to be really strong, letting you accelerate Psychic Energy, and then it just depends on what Psychic attackers you're pairing with it.
Yeah. I think the next one to talk about just briefly for a second here is the Darkspun. It's got the ability Well-Baked Body. Prevent all damage on this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's fire Pokemon. We've seen an ability like this be relevant on the Spinnerack in the control deck at Worlds the year that Henry won.
A Araquanid,
Um,
bro.
yeah, so you could beat, what was the deck you were trying to beat with that? It was
Volcanion, right?
Blacephalon.
Or
Volcanion or
Blacephalon,
Blacephalon or something.
yeah.
So like for control decks, if fire Pokemon become a tier 1 deck, the Darkspun with
Well,
the
even
Well-Baked Body.
more recently, Lucario Melmetal with the Bronzong, right? And then there's a
Oh yeah,
Bronzong,
yeah. There you go. Yeah.
in the format currently as well with the heat-proof ability.
Why is there always Pokemon with an ability that stops fire Pokemon from being able to hit it when fire Pokemon haven't been good for forever? Like, what is this?
Well, it has to
But
do
yeah,
with what it does in the video game, Azul. It's like it all goes back. And this is
is it
similar to
actually.
this is similar to what its ability is in the video game as well.
Oh, so the video game is ruining the TCG. Okay, so if we need someone to blame, we can blame the video game. Okay.
All right,
But
easy now.
I do like seeing cool abilities like this, like existing, like
Sure.
just like even if it's just like might never be good, like that existing is just like more Pokemon with like abilities like this that exist are cool. So yeah, the Darkspun sometime in the future when fire Pokemon are good, who knows when that'll be, but it could happen, right?
We've got a stage 1 Lucario here, not the EX, just a regular Lucario. For 1 fighting, it has Vengeful Knuckles, 30 plus. If any of your fighting Pokemon were knocked out by damage from an attack during your opponent's Pokemon, during their last turn, this attack does 120 more damage, so 150, if we're going times 2. So like this is something that can theoretically be a response for you, and if you're playing a Lucario EX deck, maybe you want to play one of these guys. It seems like okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of cool that you can actually play that alongside the EX now. I forgot about that because they both evolve out of Riolu. So that'd
Oh,
actually be a cool thing to.
yeah, and something else we should think to mention as well is that any of these stage 1 EXs can be grabbed out with Zoroark from Evolving Skies. You can
Oh
just
yeah,
have them in your discard pile and then Zoroark them into play.
it is a stage 1. Yeah.
I don't know if that's
Oh,
better than just putting the basic into play and then evolving
yeah.
it, but it is something you can do.
Yeah, you'll have extra. It'll be yeah, you have some extra flexibility with that for sure. A really cool card coming out, which is unfortunate that it's coming out as Scoop Up Net rotates, is the Halucha with the Flying Entry ability. It's a basic 70 HP, so you can level ball for it. Flying Entry, when you place Pokemon from your hand onto your bench during your turn, you may choose 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon and put 1 damage counter on each of them. So similar to Zigzagoon, but it can only hit bench Pokemon, but it can hit 2. But Scoop Up Net is rotating, but I still think this is a super strong ability overall, and it will definitely see play at some point. Like some deck will just be like, you know what, I'm always short by 10 damage on that one bench Pokemon. Aha, Halucha. And,
Yeah.
it'll kind of fill that void. So definitely will be good, at some point in its lifespan and standard for sure.
And probably just a good one of inclusion in some Lost Box or like other spread deck in general, right? Something with Sableye.
Yeah.
I
You
don't
combo that
think
with Sableye. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I don't think that this will be nearly as played as Zigzagoon, and mostly because of Scoop Up Net rotating. I think if we get something similar to Scoop Up Net, then maybe it would be played again. But and I think that if this stayed with Scoop Up Net, or like if this existed in the format right now, we would see very few people playing Zigzagoon, and most people would be playing this card instead. Like this card
Yeah.
is probably just like it's different because you can't target the active, which is a big deal for Zigzagoon sometimes, depending on the deck that you're playing. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think like this is a card that will be good. It will see play, but it will not be played to the levels that Zigzagoon is currently because Scoop Up Net's not going to be in the format.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Past that, we got the Koreadon. We've already talked about the Koreadon EX.
And the Great Tusky X, yeah.
Great Tusky X. What's next? Toxicroak EX. Stage 1, of course, 250 HP. Nasty Plot for 1 Dark Energy. Search your deck for up to 2 cards and put them into your hand. Then shuffle your deck. And then it's got the Toxic Ripper for Dark Double Colorless. 120. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned. Put 6 damage counters instead of 1 on that Pokemon in between turns. So with a Dark and a Double Turbo Energy, you're hitting for 100 plus the 60. So you're doing 160 damage, which 2 KOs most things. And the possibility of doing 60 more going back into your turn. We still will have the Radiant Sneasler as well, right?
Yeah, Radiant Sneasler, Dark Patches in the format still for this. So, there's some Dark support out there, Poison support as well. This card
We still
is
have the poison Toxicroak, or that's probably
no,
rotating,
that'll
right?
rotate. Yeah, that's from Sword
Yeah.
and Shield base set. But yeah, that would be interesting because you could evolve Croagunk into that one and this one, right?
That's what I'm
Um,
kind of excited for now that we
yeah.
kind of talked about the Lucario already. I'm kind of excited for like being able to evolve your basic Pokemon into the EX and the non-EX versions of the cards. That actually sounds like we haven't had that kind of.
Hmm.
We've had VMAXs plus V stars, but there's no deck that's really utilized that up to this point. I feel like
Yeah, like the Arceus Charizard VMAX deck, right? Like that did it,
that's
and
like the
then
only one I think.
Leafeon VMAX and V Star. That's
Yeah,
about it though. Those two, and neither of those were like super successful decks by any means. But
yeah,
yeah, I mean, it makes me think back to like Gardevoir GX and Gallade Breakthrough, right? People played both of those in the same deck because they
yeah.
both evolved from Curlia. But yeah, Toxicroak I don't think seems great. It's like okay, it's a decent amount of damage. Like Azul said, it does 2-hit KO most things, and there's poison support for it. There's dark support, so like this card is okay. And nasty plot. If you go, if you're going first, you nasty plot turn one. Maybe your opponent whiffs a turn to attack. Like you get super well set up. Marnie's rotating. We'll just have Judge's disruption. It feels like at this point. So
A Roxanne still.
yeah, but
That's
I
like
mean that's
game.
not going to happen on turn
Yeah,
3, right? So
yeah.
unless your
I would hope
opponent's
not.
playing Judge, you're going to get to keep those cards. And also, I mean, hey, Sylveon GX was a thing for a long time. Just going to get those cards could be okay. Maybe we see some sort of control strategy with Toxicroak. Who knows?
A shot. All right, up next we got a stage 2 non-EX, which I think could be decent. Gambit, 170 HP, stage 2 Pokemon. The big draw of this card is going to be the ability General Ship. As long as this Pokemon is in play, the attacks of your basic Pokemon do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. And then it has the Dark Double Colorless Strike Cut for 160 damage. So this actually, like, I don't know, if you got like 2 of these online, they are stage 2s, but if you're running with like one prize Pokemon doing plus 60 damage, I don't know, it seems pretty decent, I guess, for your basic Pokemon.
Yeah, we'll just have to see what people tried to pair this with. Yeah, I mean the boosted damage is theoretically pretty decent, but yeah, stage 2
Yeah,
unlikely.
stage
I
2.
mean, this is maybe good in GLC. I'll say that. Like, it's probably pretty good in GLC.
Yeah.
But not going to be the best in standard. Speaking of GLC, a great card for GLC, Revavroom, a stage 1 metal type Pokemon with the Rumbling Engine ability. You must discard an energy from your hand in order to use this ability. Once during your turn, you may draw until you have 6 cards in your hand. This is definitely a solid ability. This is something I could absolutely see being played at some point in standard. It'll definitely be played in GLC, but we're mostly talking about standard. It's attack, knock away for a metal and 3 colorless. Wow, that got a lot worse as soon as I read that. A metal and 3 colorless, 90 damage, flip a coin. If heads, this attack does 90 more damage. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is a card that will probably be played in standard at some point just for its ability. It's not a good attacker, obviously, but if you've got a deck that loves to get energies in the discard pile and you like to draw cards, Revavroom is pretty decent.
Yeah, definitely seems solid. Another EX. This one actually, I hadn't read this one yet until right before we started the podcast, but Oinkologne, 260 HP, stage 1, evolves from Lechonk. For 1 colorless energy, it does 10 damage plus 30 more for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. That's like a pretty efficient attack. And then for triple colorless energy, it does 2 den, flip a coin. If heads, this Pokemon can't attack during your next turn. So the first attack is just super efficient, right? 1 energy, 10 plus 30 for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Weakness to fighting doesn't seem terrible. I don't know. It seems like it could be okay, to be honest.
Yep, I did see Jake Gearhart posting about this card, so there's some combo out there. I don't remember exactly what he was pairing it with. I think some like damage reduction stuff maybe or something like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean this card seems okay to me. Not amazing. It is colorless, so it can fit in anything. You can pair it alongside. You can use it with most support for most types in the game, so that's good. And even if you're worried about fighting in the meta, there's Dunsparce, the fix all for colorless Pokemon.
Does Dunsparce not rotate?
No, Dunsparce is here for 2 years,
yeah.
bro. 2 years of
Sheesh.
Dunsparce.
Unlucky. All right, up next we got some cards we've already talked about and some reprints. So we got reprint of Palpad, Nest Ball's coming back. We talked about the Rock Chestplate EXP shares getting reprinted. Defiant Band we talked about last week, which is as far as comeback cards, which is something they made a point of in that video at Worlds. This is what they've given us so far. I'll go ahead and reread it for anyone who doesn't know what it does. The Defiant Band is a Pokemon tool card. If you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, the attacks of the Pokemon this card is attached to do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So if your opponent has more prize cards than you, you're doing 30 more damage. And as far as comeback cards, I think it's the only thing we've seen so far. Now, we're only one set into Scarlet and Violet, but I think a lot of us are expecting a little bit more as far as comeback cards go. Comeback cards go when they kind of made like a big point about it in the kind of announcement video at Worlds.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Um,
again, these are all tool cards, which we're seeing
yeah,
now. It's different than items, so we see the little purple indicator, Pokemon tool in the top left corner, and the information about tool is now purple in the bottom corner. So differentiating them from the item cards. Once again,
yeah.
once this new set comes out, a couple supporters. I don't remember if we talked about Jacques or not the other week, but a new supporter: search your deck for up to 2 evolution Pokemon, reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. This, of course, differs from Arezu, which is currently in the format, which lets you search your deck for 3 evolution Pokemon, but they cannot be rule box Pokemon. So Jacques can search for Pokemon EX, and it can also search for Pokemon VMAX and Pokemon VSTAR. This feels like an okay card. It might be played in something at some point. This feels like a card that, this is a card that years ago, if we're looking at like 2007, 2010 formats, stuff like that, like this card would be insane. But when we're looking at a format currently, which has cards like Professor's Research, which is also getting reprinted, discard your hand, draw 7 cards, it's hard to justify, using Jacques when you could just use Professor's Research and draw into Ultra Ball.
Yeah. Is it Jacques or is it Jack?
Oh, it might be Jack.
That's all I
Bro, I
got.
don't know. I gotta figure these
Yeah.
things out before the set
I
comes
think
out,
we
though.
I think we talked about Jack before. I mean, no one's gonna play it, so don't worry. You're not gonna have to worry about it when you're casting. No one's gonna have Jack in their deck. Um, another one. Professor's Research are getting reprinted. We've talked about Penny before. Team Stargrunt, supporter card. Put an energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon on top of their deck. So energy disruption supporter card. Nothing new. They always give us a new one that does something a little bit different than the
Team
last. Of
Flare
course,
Grunt, Team
yeah.
Skull Grunt, Team Yell Grunt.
Team Stargrunt.
Yeah.
Team Flareground, of course, being the most powerful of all of them, which was just discarding energy from your opponent's side of the field. So they definitely scaled back the power level of them a little bit, but still can be good in some kind of control deck moving forward. New stadium card, the Beach Court. The retreat cost of each player's basic Pokemon in play is a colorless less. So this is basically a reprint of Sky Arrow Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we've had a card,
Yeah.
literally the exact same card as the stadium form before. And it was pretty good. It was pretty good back then. It definitely seems like it definitely could have potential moving forwards as well.
Yeah. Skyro Bridge was a super important card for the Virizion Genesect deck that won Worlds back in 2014 because everything in that deck was a basic and had 1 retreat. So yeah, just that pivot ability. I mean, I think the first thing I think of with this card right now is Comfy, right? Being able to
Yep.
move your Comfy out of the active into a different Comfy or into your attacker seems pretty good. With the plethora of switching cards that are just kind of good in the meta right now, I switch an Escape Rope mainly, I guess. Maybe that doesn't. I think maybe you'd rather play just like Pokestop or something still in the deck, but yeah, I mean, Beach Court is probably a card that will be played at some point. Yes.
Yeah, definitely could see it for sure. And also like yeah. There'll definitely be a deck at some point that will take advantage of it. Next new EX is the Spidops EX. With a 260 HP, stage 1. Like we were mentioning, like Gyarados having the 300 HP kind of felt like a lot. This one's got 260. Got that Trap Territory ability. Your opponent's active Pokemon tree cost is colorless more. It specifically does not mention you can only use one of these abilities at a time, so you can stack them.
Yep.
And that's relevant because it's attack, a grass colorless. Wire Hang does 90 plus 30 more damage for each energy in your opponent's active Pokemon's retreat cost. So you can set up a couple of Spidops, hitting for 9. You're hitting for 120 base. If they got 1 retreat costs, looking at 150. You got a couple more Spidops in play. You can get up to 240 damage. And if they have more than 1 retreat cost, you're even going higher than that. So could actually be pretty decent, especially with only costing grass colorless for the attack. I think this could actually be okay.
Yeah, this card is pretty decent. It's pretty energy efficient. Galar Mine rotates, which would be a really good card for this deck, but Air Balloon also rotates, which is a really bad card for this deck. So There's good things going for it, and you also could just pair this with Leafeon VMAX, right? Like, just put like 3 or 4 of these guys on your bench and start swinging with Leafeon because it does more damage,
Oh,
right?
true. Yeah. Yeah, I forgot about that. Leafeon doesn't rotate, I guess, then, right?
No, Leafeon doesn't rotate. And this is
Okay.
such a fun game. Azul trying to figure out what cards rotate and don't rotate.
All right, let's move on. We've talked about Arcanine EX before. I guess we can just kind of mention how sad we are that this terrestrial ability or attribute on the Arcanine is the same as the Gyarados. Can't be affected by damage while it's on the bench. It's so unfortunate, man. Like, reading
I
it just
mean,
makes
if
me
they had
sad.
just like if they made this Arcanine like a lightning type or something,
Yeah,
like
something.
at least like do that. I don't know. Yeah, it's so boring, so lame.
Or they could have even said something cheesy, like the terrestrial effect could have been like these Pokemon does 10 more damage to lightning, water, and grass Pokemon or something. Like I don't even know. Just like something different. Utilize the terrestrial attribute or mechanic, whatever you want to call it, more than just putting the same thing on every Pokemon. I don't know. It seems like such a waste to actually even include it in the
Oh,
TCG.
this Arcanine is this Growlithe is kinda good in GLC. I'm realizing it's got 90 HP, 3
9
retreats, so you can
HP.
heavy ball for it and level ball for it, and Stoke. Search your deck for 2 basic fire energy and attach them to this Pokemon. That's turn 2 Arcanine Unbroken Bonds. That's pretty good.
All right, Slowbro, stage 1 Pokemon, 100 HP. Got the ability Strange Behavior. We've seen abilities similar to this in the past. As often as you select during your turn, you may move a damage counter from one of your Pokemon to this Pokemon, but it only has 100 HP. We've seen stuff like Reuniclus that lets you move it from anywhere to anywhere. We saw the Dusknoir that I think had this exact same ability, where it moved it all to itself.
Yeah, this is actually a reprint of
Stage 1.
This is a reprint of the very first Slowbro card. It had the exact same
Oh, did it?
Pokemon power. It was also called Strange Behavior, and it let you do the same thing. But that Slowbro only had 60 hit points, so
Yeah, but everything else back then had like the big things had like 100 HP. So that's like yeah, whereas like we're going from the 100 HP to 300 HP.
And the card
So I
was
feel
not
like
good back then, so
yeah, so it'll be harder for it to be good now then I think for sure. And this is just like some way to abuse that. There might be end up being some way to abuse that for sure.
well, we skipped over the Arbovola from the Scarlet set. Let me remember what it does. I think it's a stage 2, but when you evolve it, you like heal all damage.
From one of your Pokemon.
Oh,
I
it's
don't think
just
your
from
combo.
one.
Yeah,
It's just from one.
yeah.
Okay.
you're
Yeah,
gonna move
Gargoyle.
all the damage off your active Pokemon to your Slowbro to heal it with your Arbor. In a very roundabout way when you could just heal your
Yeah.
your active.
Yeah, I didn't know if it like discarded energy or something like that, right? Like a Wussy Prime, but
Let's
then
move on.
yeah,
Go ahead.
we got Slowbro, and then moving down.
We talked about Magnezone before. I think everyone knows about the Magnezone now.
Yeah, Magnezone was one of the very first ones revealed. We've got Pachirisu. Electric pouches can't be paralyzed, and then Group Zap for a lightning colorless 10 plus 20 more damage for each of your benched lightning Pokemon.
Oh.
I don't know why I decided to read this one. Let's move on.
let's go to Pawmot. Pawmot is a cool. They're making a lot of cool stage 2 Pokemon for sure. Pawmot stage 2, only 130 HP. For lightning colors, it does 230 damage and discard all energy from this Pokemon. But its ability says once during your turn, you may search your deck for a basic lightning energy and attach it to this Pokemon. So this one's kind of cool, actually. I think it self-charges itself up. 230 is a lot of damage. You get some damage modifiers involved with that, something like that. And I mean, this could potentially like contend with like EX decks or even Vs and V stars. To be honest, you're hitting pretty hard.
Yeah, it does a lot of damage. It is a stage 2, so it's gonna be something you got to set up. I don't think it's its own deck, right? I think it's like a support or finisher in a different deck, something like that. Also, I gotta say, I think Pawmot definitely looks like the main character of a Cartoon Network show, doesn't he?
I guess a little bit, yeah.
He just looks like a derpy, like a kid. I don't know. I also something I noticed this weekend as well. Pawmot, right? Think about original Pokemon, Pidgey, Pidgeotto, Pidgeot. I don't know if that's an intentional parallel, but that's something I noticed this last weekend at San Diego. Because there's Pawmot doing decently at San Diego in VGC.
Oh, okay. I was going to say like something. I was like, "There's no way it was in TCG." Right? I was like,
No,
"What?"
no.
Yeah, VGC.
We
Let's
talked
move
about
on
the
to
Miraidon.
yeah, we talked about right now. Maybe one of the probably the most hyped card or the most talked about card that was like released recently or revealed recently is the Banette EX. We'll first talk about the Shuppet. 6 HP. It's got the Wrapped in Shadows attack, which is pretty relevant actually. For a Psychic Energy, flip a coin of heads. The opponent can't play item cards from their hand during their next turn. And then the Banette EX, stage 1, of course, 250 HP. For 1 Psychic Energy, Eternal Darkness, 30 damage. Your opponent can't play any item cards from their hand during their next turn. And then Psychic Colors, it's got the Poltergeist, which we've seen before, 60 damage for each trainer card in the opponent's hand. So, of course, a lot of people are reminiscing and remembering the good old Quaking Punch days from Seismitoad EX. Now we got the Banette EX, still only doing 30 damage because Quaking Punch also only did 30 damage, but everything's got a lot more HP now. And yeah, you don't have that many modifiers to work with. So I don't think Banette is going to cut it when the follow-up attack is Poltergeist.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when Garbodor from Guardians Rising came out, and in that same set there was the Trevenant that had a Poltergeist attack, and there was like people who were like, "Oh, this is so sick! You either force them to play their item cards, so you trash lanch them, and then if they don't play their item cards, you Poltergeist them." um, and I think Banette combines those two strategies into one card, right? Because you like item lock them, they can't play their items, and then boom, Poltergeist, you do a bunch of damage. And it's not just for items, it is for trainer cards as well. The problem with attacks like Poltergeist is that your opponent can play around them to an extent, right? Like obviously if you're
Yeah.
using Eternal Darkness, they can't play the item cards, but they can still play supporters. And some supporters have effects like, shuffle your hand into your deck and draw 4 cards. So that way you only have 4 cards in your hand, and it's unlikely Poltergeist is going to be doing very much damage. So I do think this card is good, but it's definitely not to Seismitoad levels, and it probably will not see play immediately, but I don't think that this is a card that you should forget it exists by any means.
Yeah. I think maybe so that was the most talked about card, but this next one might be the best card that we've seen so far. It's the Klefki 70 HP basic Pokemon with the ability Prank Lock. As long as this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, each player's basic Pokemon in play have no abilities other than Prank Lock. Like that's a super strong ability right there. It's like what Empoleon wishes it was. Empoleon is a good attacker when you use it for why you use it, but having something like the Klefki to slow your opponent down seems pretty good.
Doesn't shut down Summoning Star.
That's true. Yeah.
Though Lugia
still pretty good.
Yeah, Lugia is not going to be as popular as one rotation is. But anyway, yeah, this card is definitely good, and will certainly be played probably right as soon as it comes out. It'll be making its way into certain types of decks. Obviously, this card is only as good as the basic ability using Pokemon in the meta are, and the basic ability using Pokemon in the meta seem pretty decent right now. So yeah, Klefki I think is going to be a pretty solid one.
Yeah, Klefki seems solid for sure.
We've got the Houndstone here. It's a stage 1 for 2 Psychic. Grave Visit, 80 damage. 10 damage for each Psychic Pokemon in your discard pile. So be Revenge, but not really be Revenge. It only works for Psychic Pokemon, and it requires 2 Psychic Energy. So probably not going to be great. Then there's the Annihilate, which I saw people talking about this in regards to like the comeback mechanic thing, right? Or with an emphasis on comebacks, because they did not say comeback mechanics. They said an emphasis on comebacks. So Annihilate, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a new evolution of Primeape. So it's a stage 2 for the Primeape evolution line.
I was confused for a second because on the page here it says it's stage 1, but on the card it says stage 2. I was like, if it's stage 1, it actually seems pretty good.
No, it's a stage 2.
Yeah, it's a stage 2. Yeah, so everyone's gonna be running a 1/1/1 Annihilate to make a comeback in their games. So you go Roxanne Annihilate.
Energy.
Yeah, and 1 fighting energy. You go Roxanne Annihilate, and then you start swinging.
So Annihilate's attack, Enraged Fist, for 1 fighting. It does 70 damage for each prize card your opponent has taken, which is a lot of damage. That does build up pretty decently. And being a fighting type, you can usually make use of some buffs. Obviously, Choice Belt will still be in the format for any Vs or VMAXs, and then Dynamic Punch for 2 fighting does 170 and 50 to itself. So that's a decent amount of damage for 2 energy as well. But it is a stage 2, so probably just not going to be very good.
Yeah, I don't see it. Don't see it working out very well. Keep moving along. I think the next thing to talk about that's relevant, we've already kind of gone over the Iron Shreds, would be the Squavette. It's a basic Pokemon, and it's got the ability Hidey Hole. Hidey Hole. Once during your turn, you may shuffle your hand and return the cards to the bottom of your deck without looking at them. Wait, what? Okay, I guess yeah, and then draw a card without looking at them. Without looking at them, extra text there is a little bit weird, but yeah, shuffle your
That probably
hand.
will not be on the English translation of the card.
Yeah, so you shuffle your hand, put it on the bottom of the deck like you would with Marnie, and then you draw a single card. So you can do weird stuff to set up for. I think what you mentioned before the cast when we were talking about it, like doing like mustard plays, would be something you can combo with it, right? Like you use the Altaria that sets a supporter on top of your deck, and then you Hidey Hole into the supporter and play the mustard and go from there. So that could be kind of cool, I guess.
Yeah, this card is it's okay, right? A basic Pokemon that can see you an extra card, right? Is not It's not the worst. And if you have this set up in combination with like Bibarel, right, you can draw more cards. But then you have to ask the question: why are we setting up another Squavette instead of setting up another Bibarel, right? Just to draw more cards, or
Tough questions right there.
yeah, or another Lipard, or another Curlia, right? Yeah, I think that this will probably work the best in some sort of combo deck where you are stacking the top card of your deck to do something really good if it's the last card.
Yeah. So
Oh,
theoretically, I
there's
mean, it
that
would work with
Brandon supporter or something, right? That's a thing.
yeah,
Where if it's the last card in your hand, you like draw a bunch of cards. It's like a
yeah,
chorus, right? So
yeah. So theoretically, it would. We lose Eldegoss, but it would have been good with the Eldegoss loop, and then also you don't. It theoretically makes it so you never deck out. So some kind of control thing with it could definitely happen because
Pidgeot's probably
yeah,
still better though, right?
maybe that is true. We do have Pidgeot. That's true. That's true.
Because you get to keep your
Um,
hand.
yeah, that's true. So maybe that is always better than Squavette. But I'm just trying to find
Yeah, for sure.
uses for the vet. Once Pidgeot rotates, Squavette's about to take over the control game. Um, you know, this is plan.
This
All
next
right, let's
one,
move along.
yeah,
Go
this
ahead.
next one I hadn't read until right before we started the cast, but I actually think this is a card that, could be good. And it's honestly just a card that I think is cool for it to exist in the format, and it makes it so that, setup decks could maybe be a little bit better. And that's the Indeedee with a colorless attack. Raise well. Search your deck for a card that evolves from one of your Pokemon in play and put it onto that Pokemon to evolve it. So this type of card has existed before and has been played. The first one I think of is Jirachi from Hidden Legends. Did pretty much this exact same thing for a colorless. And then we even saw, like, in 2017, the Diancie from Burning
Yep.
Shadows, which for a Fairy Energy did this, was played in the Gardevoir deck a little bit here and there. So, yeah, I think there's definitely potential for Indeedee to be in the format.
Yeah, could definitely see it working out, especially like maybe like a rotation or two away.
Yeah.
Some of the trainer cards here, a couple of reprints, Rare
Bro,
Candy, Ultra Ball.
you're
Am I
skipping the
missing one?
mouse? Are you kidding me?
Oh, that's right. The mouse hold, 70 HP, stage 1.
What do you think of this Pokemon, by the way?
It's ridiculous.
This
It
is
just
one.
looks
This
like
is one Pokemon.
yeah, I know.
The 4 of them are one Pokemon.
Yeah, they combine together to become one. First Tandem Mouse, and then that evolves into Mouse Hold. And Mouse Hold does Slap for a colorless for 40, and then has the family attack. And this attack does 70 damage for each of your Mouse Hold in play.
Just
This is
imagine the
this-
little mouse like beating up on you, right?
well, the whole fam, bro. It's not just one, bro. You
Yeah,
got the whole
mom,
squad.
dad. Like,
Junior, get him in there.
um,
It's just such a weird car. It's such a weird concept for a Pokemon. I don't know. It looks like the mouse looks like a mouse from like a cartoon from like back in the 90s or something. Like it does it like it looks like I don't know. It's just such and their hands are huge. They have these massive hands that aren't attached to their bodies. It's just such a weird card, to be honest. It's so weird.
well, I don't know. Like, you probably don't know
A
this
weird
either, but
Pokemon.
in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, if you have a Tandem Mouse in your party, when you're walking around, just randomly, they will evolve into Mousehold.
Yeah.
And there is a chance that when they evolve into Mousehold, that they evolve into a Mousehold family that only has one baby mouse. It's like a low chance. So it's like they're either going to
Yeah.
have two baby mice or there's going to be one little baby mouse.
So you want the triple fam.
It's like much rarer.
You want the the only child Mousehold.
Yeah, you want the family with the dark backstory. Why did one of the twins not make it? Right?
Oh my gosh. I didn't know we were going there with this. All right, so you want, only child Mousehold is rarer.
The family attack.
That would actually have been sick is if they made some of the Mousehold cards. There's just like there's only 3 mice in it, but it's the exact same card.
That would be kind of grim, though. Imagine if there's like just a secret rare version of this card.
Why does it
like the little one that's on the one on the right's head is just not there? Like what happened?
Well, why are you assuming he's dead? What if they just only ever had one baby? Why are you assuming that?
That's true too, right?
Is there some lore behind the mouse that I don't know? The mouse.
No.
Mousehold lore? Oh, okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think this attack is like okay, and with Zoroark, you can stream stage 1s into play pretty easily, right?
Yeah, many mouse.
Twin energy does rotate, so you're not really going to be doing 280 as easily. It's going to be 2 attachments, or you're going to have energy excel like Raihan, or I guess like Flaffy or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's okay.
It's not good. All right, let's move along. We got some more trainer cards, some more reprints. Rocky Helmet reprinted, Rare Candy, Ultra Ball. We've talked about the Electricity Generator. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Choose up to 2 basic lightning cards you find there. Attach them to your bench lightning Pokemon any way you like. Seems like a powerful card. It is an item card. Seems like it could be pretty good. And then Picnic Basket healed 30 damage from all Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent. So an upgraded, a different take on what is the one
Freshwater
card?
set.
Freshwater set. There's been so many times throughout my time playing the Pokemon TCG where I've thought, maybe Freshwater set is the play for this like situation. I've definitely had that thought multiple times throughout
I've brought it up before a time or two as well. Like
yeah, it's never quite good enough.
Right.
Okay, got a couple more supporters. Of course, research. Take a look at Katie. Using this card ends your turn. Shuffle your hand into your deck and then draw 8 cards. We saw Blues Tactics was literally like the exact same thing, but it was like draw up to 8 or something.
Well, so it was a little different because you played the supporter and then it said after your turn is over, draw until you have 8 cards in your hand.
Oh yeah.
So it didn't just immediately end your turn.
Yeah, so definitely better.
Anytime a supporter says using this card ends your turn, the next sentence has to be insane for it to be good. It has to be something like search your deck for 4 fire energy and put them on one of your Pokemon.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think Katie's doing it for sure.
I think if I'm using a supporter in standard that ends my turn, I think Cafe Master is probably a better choice than Katie, to be honest. I'd rather accelerate some energies than draw cards, I feel like, in that instance.
Maybe one of the most powerful Pokemon recovery cards we've ever actually seen is Miriam. Choose up to 5 Pokemon cards from your discard pile, reveal them, shuffle them into your deck, then draw 3 cards. I don't think we've ever seen, and this is a supporter, we've never seen a Pokemon recovery card also just like draw you cards. Actually, this is like actually the most powerful, like, well, at least supporter version of Pokemon recovery we've ever seen.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's an upgraded version of I mean, I guess it doesn't get you back energies. So like it's not quite comparable to like Brock's Grit or what is the Diamond Pearl one? Palmer's, is it Palmer's? They get you back stuff.
There's Palmer something.
Yeah. I mean this card's really cool. I mean, Ordinary Rod's rotating, so like I mean this card seems like if you're playing Reggie's post rotation, you're playing this card, right?
Yeah. Made for Reggie's.
Reggie's is gonna have a hard time without Aurora energy, though. So.
That's true. Probably not playing Reggie's, but it was made for Reggie's.
No, you're playing basic energies, Reggie's.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, Drew was already doing that at Arlington Regionals, so
he was already ahead. There's a difference between playing 1 basic energy.
No, he played 3. It was like 2 grass and a fire. It was like 2 grass and a fire or something.
Oh snap!
I might be incorrect. My info might be correct on that. I'm pretty sure it was 3 though. And we got attack turn 1 with the Drago.
We got Mezagoza, which I think is a pretty decent stadium, honestly. Once during each player's turn, excuse me, that player may flip a coin. If heads, they search a deck for a Pokemon, reveal it, and put it into their hands. So, I don't know. This is an interesting one because it's like theoretically can boost your consistency, but like I mean, this is definitely going to be one of
So
those
help your
situations
opponent.
where it's like you flip tails and your opponent just like gets to set up because you put this stadium in play, right?
Yeah, it doesn't seem great.
I think I could see this being played if there is ever a deck that doesn't care what your opponent does, but only cares about themselves setting up. And it's like
Yeah.
if you set up your strategy, you win the game. Like then that deck might play this card, right? If it's like some crazy like combo deck or lock deck or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Something that have to be like more aggressive for sure. Because giving your opponent like extra bonuses like that is usually not great. The Pokestop, something like Pokestop's a little bit different because the decks that play Pokestop are built to use the
Yep.
Pokestop, whereas everything else you go up against that doesn't play Pokestop isn't. So, yeah, Pokestop's something a little bit different than that for sure. Up next, we got the Lucario EX. I don't think we've talked about this one yet. 260 HP. Of course, it evolves from Riolo Stage 1. Low kick for fighting in a Colossus for 60 damage. And it has the Aura Sphere for fighting Colossus. 160. This attack does 50 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So, yeah, seems pretty mid, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean it's a decent amount of damage spread between two things, but fighting colorless is a pretty steep cost. There's like gutsy pickaxe
Yeah.
in the format to accelerate, but that's not really great. And then after that, it's just some good reprints, cards that are just kind of like good to have in the format. Energy Switch, Energy Search, Potion, which I mean it has been played in competitive decks before, but it's been a long time. Pokemon have a lot more HP and do a lot more damage.
Maybe we should have given
Um,
it the heal 40 buff. It'll
yeah.
come eventually.
We've got Pokegear 3.0. I think this is another good card. This is a card that hasn't like always been standard legal, but it's been standard
Yeah.
legal for the past like 4 years or something like that. It feels like, and this feels like just a good card to have in the format. It gets played in decks randomly here and there. It's not like game breaking, just a good consistency option to exist.
Mm-hmm.
We got Switch, Pokemon Catcher, Judge. That's pretty good, pretty big reprint. Another card that just kind of it feels like has been around for a long time now, and it's always been pretty mid as long as it's been around. So it'll
Yeah.
probably just continue to be mid in the new format. Little sneeze, excuse me.
The only new card out of these ones, I think, is the Youngster, which is just a reprint of Shauna. Basically, shuffle your hand into your deck, then draw 5 cards. So a good shuffle draw that doesn't shuffle your opponent's hand. Not giving a Cynthia back, but keeping us on track with a Shauna reprint, I guess, is okay.
And then we got another few cards here. The Ampharos EX. Did we talk about this? I think we did,
Yeah,
right?
we've talked about them before.
It's not that great. I mean, it does have that lightning item card, which is pretty decent, I guess.
I think the last thing to mention is just a couple other reprints. Energy Retrieval, Crushing Hammer, Vitality Band is getting a reprint.
Wait,
And
where are
then
you?
am I further down than you?
I guess so. Yeah, you skipped quite. You skipped a couple things that are interesting.
All right, hit me with it.
We got Quaquaval, the stage 2 water Pokemon. Once during your turn, you may attach a basic energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon. It's a stage 2, but Energy Excel. And we got
You said
Mimikyu
they were interesting.
EX. Void Return. I guess
Yes.
we have talked about this
Yeah,
before,
we've
but
talked about Mimikyu before.
all right, whatever. Go down to the reprints. Skip it.
Yeah, that was. I think that's all of them. And then we got another draw 3 supporter, of course, Nimona. Draw 3 cards. So they're keeping us. They're keeping us drawing 3 cards. Love to see it. And yeah, that's it for. That's like basically the full reveal of Scarlet and Violet. It's possible that there's some more cards that come out.
Yeah, if they get like a 1.5 set before our
Yeah,
Scarlet Violet base set comes out,
we might get
then we
those.
could see more cards. But yeah, those that I think pretty much all of those should be in our Scarlet Violet base set, most likely.
Yeah, so definitely a lack of comeback cards, I would say, right? But I think we give them the benefit of the doubt on this one, and we definitely have to see the next couple sets for sure before we like draw a hard conclusion on. Okay, they made that statement in the announcement video at Worlds. Where's the pay up?
Yeah.
And then overall, like nothing seems too ridiculous. Like I think Guard Force seems good, and of course rotation is going to hit and change things up for sure. So maybe rotation is going to hit harder than we think. But I think we'll definitely be playing V stars and V maxes after rotation happens.
Yeah,
Majority will be V stars and V maxes.
I think
Thankfully, hopefully
so.
not Lugia.
Yeah, I think we'll be seeing a lot of V stars. I mean, I think things like, just stage ones that do a lot of damage seem like they're going to be pretty good, like
Yeah.
Palkia and Hisuian Zoroark and even Kyurem VMAX potentially still, like
Come back. Let's go.
Duraludon and Arceus are not going anywhere. So I think these decks are going to continue to probably be pretty decent. And then, of course, Lost Box doesn't really lose too much to rotation. I guess Scoop Up Net. Scoop Up Net's kind of big, actually. I take that back.
Well, if you go to like a Giratina build, I think it's a little bit less
Yeah.
important.
And you
Yeah.
probably do go to Giratina. And Giratina seems, I mean, with no Parasol, Giratina seems a lot better.
Oh yeah. Giratina definitely seems pretty good moving into rotation for sure.
Well,
But we'll talk about that in the future. I
another
think
time.
that's another time. I think that's all we got. Chip, send us away.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode. We appreciate the support. As always, if you do want to show your support, the best way to do that is to leave a rating on your favorite podcasting platform or drop us a sub over on the YouTube channel. We did pass 4,000 subs, by the way, on the YouTube channel. I don't know if you saw that
All
or
right,
not,
let's
Azul.
go.
So thanks a bunch to everyone for the support over here. And if you want to stay connected with us, the best way to do that is over on Twitter. Myself at Chip Ritchie, Azul at Azul_GG, and the podcast is at Uncommon_Energy.
Thanks all for watching. Good luck if you're going to Liverpool this weekend, and we'll catch you next week, Tuesday at 7 a.m. Eastern. Peace.